We're on.
Are you coming? Whoops. Okay, all right, sorry, we missed you, bye. All right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. All right, so today we've got a couple of interesting things to talk about and a choice. So would you prefer to learn about something that's really pretty interesting that I'm sure that you've probably not heard before? Shelled egg, peeled onion, peeled garlic clove left overnight is a problem and prohibited.
It depends where you leave them.
Sure.
Okay, or we could do this one next week, which is about the Sabbath and obligating oneself to actually maybe take on debt to pay for Shabbat. So we're in Tractate Shabbat, and I'm going to take a little side tour to this interesting halakha.
There's nothing.
And a good thing. And a good thing at that. Okay, go ahead, Alan. Aharon.
Several biblical injunctions are derived from the warning to beware for your souls, including the biblical prohibition of placing oneself in any type of life-threatening situation. For example, walking dangerously.
Passed on a top portion of the page. I'm gonna.
No, it's the same thing.
No, this one isn't.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
that's because she's one-sided.
Okay.
Walking dangerously near the edge of the road, exposing oneself to disease, etc. In addition to such obvious dangerous acts, our sages warned against other dangers which are not understood today, such as the well-known injunction against eating meat and fish together. Really?
Yes,
Fish?
there's actually halakha which explains that one should not eat meat and fish together.
Although we cannot define the result of the danger in terms of medical science, we accept and adhere faithfully to our sages' warnings that eating fish and meat together is a danger.
Okay, and if you're really looking for the halachic basis for that, I've got a lot of up to number 28, 30, whatever. I don't have all of the halachic pieces. I think I missed one or two at the end, number 26, 27. But if you wanted to see what number 2 is, it comes from Talmud. It's Pesachim about the meat and fish together.
Another practice involves foods which our sages consider dangerous is eating a shelled egg, peeled egg, or peeled garlic clove that was left overnight. Although this practice is less widespread than the universally accepted restriction against eating meat and fish together, the Talmud maintains that ruach ra'ah, basically literally a bad spirit, or the spirit of impurity, rests upon these 3 foods when peeled and left overnight, similar to the spirit of impurity that rests on one's hands during nighttime sleep.
Okay, so that's why when one gets up in the morning, one washes. How do we wash in the mornings?
Carefully.
Good, and
Right, left, right, left, right, left.
exactly. So how do we wash before eating?
Right, 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 left, left, left.
Left. Exactly. Okay, so and it's interesting. I mean, you can see where this is coming from in Talmud. It's coming from Nida. So perhaps there's some issue of Taharat Mishpacha, which is an issue, although they're also speaking about the Ruach Ra'ah, which is slightly, obviously different, but that's when one sleeps overnight, one wakes up, one, washes one's hands. So, at any rate. But the actual issue about eating the meat and fish together comes from Nida. So, go ahead.
One who eats these foods after they were left overnight states the Talmud, endangers his life. Moreover, he could be judged by the heavenly court as a person who took his own life.
So not only is it an endangerment, but the heavenly court's going to say you did it and it was really, really bad. So let's keep going here.
This is Rashi.
Yes, right. Rashi explains the Shulchan Aruch L'ner.
In view of the severity of both the offense and the punishment, it is difficult to understand why certain communities do not comply with this restriction. How can they ignore such frightening consequences? There is a basic difference, however, between the 2 prohibitions mentioned above. The prohibition about eating meat and fish together is quoted by the Shulchan Aruch as practical halakha. Wait, I'm not familiar with eating meat and fish together. So do they mean that you can't
That
have a
at the
fish.
same meal, it's kind of like dairy and
What if you have,
meat.
Gefilte fish is the first course and then chicken is the main course? That's not allowed?
Well, there's an argument with regard to, is that really meat? Because then there's this small exception of the group of Jews who, left and only considered meat to be like beef.
I just know that in the manual, a few people could eat on separate plates, like it's in Pesach, for example, when fish served as a first course, you have to take away the plates and put new plates for the rest of the meal.
And that's derived from this?
That's,
Because,
I-
we
this
always
is
have
the only
gefilte fish as the first
time
course, and then maybe we could add lamb as a main course on Passover, right? So
Right.
that would be
That would be meat by anybody's definition,
pretty much.
Yeah.
So that would be prohibited according to this?
according to this.
Except that there's the out that you change plates and you make it a different,
That is
You know
true.
what this relates to? It relates to the argument that the rabbis have with Einstein's. Because what they do is they allow their power, and their power is they're the only ones that are supposed to read and study Talmud, to get down to the average person, and when the average person knows as much as the rabbis, and the rabbis no longer have any power.
Okay, so knowledge is power, that's an argument, at any rate, and that's why we're all studying this, among other things. But we're gonna study it.
That was not an attack on you.
That's fine, I don't have an issue with it, you're right, it's not. So, at any rate, with regard to these, shelled eggs, peeled onions, peeled garlic, and clove, these are some of like the minor halachot that most people are not gonna be aware of. Even according to this, which is sent out to a very observant group, it's going to be something that not a lot of people know about. Whether one observes this and or many of the other things that we've talked about in this class is at some level, it's up to you guys, right? I mean, you know what you choose to do. My job is to bring these interesting pieces, and we're gonna talk about Mazzal after this, which is another yet interesting piece. Some people subscribe to Mazzal, some people don't. So at any rate, let's get through this one here.
So if you're going to an early brunch, and the night before you hard boil some eggs and you make egg salad, because that's what you said you would bring to that early brunch, and it sat in the refrigerator overnight.
That's a different situation, and it's not, there are caveats with regard to all of these issues. We have to go through this before you can really get into the questions, but let's keep going. Let's get through it. So egg salad is different, some things are added to the egg, and if it's kept in a refrigerator in a separate dish, is that different? And actually, this is gonna talk about it, so your question will be answered shortly.
The prohibition against eating the three peeled fruits, however, is omitted by many of the Rishonim and the Shulchan Aruch, probably because they held that the particular spirit of impurity in question was no longer prevalent in their time.
Okay, so now we're talking about halacha that is not accepted by even many of the Rishonim, and certainly not even the Shulchan Aruch by the 1500s, which is certainly a guide of many Orthodox Jews, right? Keep going.
Thus, in many communities, this practice is not followed. And indeed, many people have never heard of it. But in many other communities, the practice is enforced to one degree or another. While omitted by the Shulchan Aruch, the warning against eating these three peeled fruits is cited by some Rishonim and recorded as practical halakha by several of the later authorities, including among them the Peri Hadash, the Shulchan Aruch Harav, the Aruch HaShulchan, and Ben Ish Chai.
Okay, Diane, pick it up.
Let's see, but in many other communities, the practice is enforced to one degree or another.
Wait, let's see. Must everyone observe this prohibition?
Where are we?
Must everyone observe this prohibition? Down here on the page, about here in bold.
Next to the last paragraph.
I think I'm on the wrong part. The entire egg?
Okay, so it starts with whoever comes from a family
Okay.
that adheres strictly.
Okay, whoever comes from a family that adheres strictly to this custom should definitely continue to do so, since it has a Talmudic source and is surely not less valid than any other well-founded custom. The poskim differ as to whether or not one who never followed this practice is required to adopt it. Let's see. Some rule that the practice is mandatory, others recommend adopting it, while others do not require following it at all.
Okay, so now remember what we're dealing with is something that is found to be a custom by Talmud, right? That's basically where we get our source material for it. Go ahead.
The prohibition applies even when the peeled food items were wrapped, sealed, and stored in a closed pot or container or were placed in a refrigerator. It also makes no difference whether or not the peeled items were whole, cut up into large or small pieces, crushed or diced.
Okay, so that kind of answers Mike's question. Steve, you want to pick it up there?
The prohibition applies only when the entire egg, onion, or garlic clove is peeled. If even a minuscule part of it was left unpeeled, even if the root hairs on top of the onion or garlic remain, the food is not considered to be peeled, and the prohibition does not apply.
Okay, and so this is why I love like bringing this kind of halakha for us to discuss, because it's not something that we've heard of generally, not something that we've practiced perhaps generally, and yet here we have a caveat on how to get around it, right? We have the loophole. Here's your loophole. If your entire egg, some part of it still has a little bit of shell on it, you're okay. If your onion still has a little bit of hairs on it, you haven't like chopped the whole thing, you're okay. Go ahead.
The egg, onion, or garlic clove is kept separate from.
That's it.
It only applies when, okay, the egg, onion, or garlic clove was kept separate from any other food. It is permitted, however, to mix them together with other ingredients such as vegetables, tuna fish, vinegar, or mayonnaise, and leave them overnight. Even adding a large amount of salt or sugar to the peeled food items is sufficient to permit them to be left overnight.
Okay.
The egg, onion, or garlic clove was peeled with the intent of using it immediately, and it was then left overnight. Or if it was peeled in order to be used the next day. Doesn't make sense.
So the intention behind it was not to leave it arguably overnight. The intention, so we're looking at intent, kavanah, an
Right.
important part of many of our halachic bases, many of our halachic findings. Not only do we have to find the Talmud, but we also look at what are our caveats, what are our loopholes, and here, what is our intention in doing it? So, were we planning on using it immediately, but then it happened to be left overnight? All right. Or if it was peeled in order to be used the next day. So, but go ahead. If, however,
Okay. I still don't understand that. But anyway.
so these are the prohibited acts. So it's prohibited if the entire thing is peeled. It's prohibited if it's kept separate from any other food. It's permitted, but you can mix them with other things. So in other words, how do you get around the loophole? What's the loophole to this issue, right? You leave a little bit of top hair on your onion, and you can mix it with whatever else you want, and the next day, you can remove the top hair of the onion and serve it, right? It's prohibited if the intent that you just forgot about it, so it got left overnight. It's prohibited if you plan to use it the next day. So, but you have another caveat, which is allowing you permission, which says, if it was shelled.
If it was shelled or peeled with the express intent of being frozen or used at a later date, as many large companies or bakeries do, it is permitted.
Okay, so frozen makes a difference. It's
Right.
prohibited if, okay, so, and actually, go ahead. The dry egg,
Dried egg, onion, or garlic powder does not fall into the category of shelled and is permitted.
okay, so if it's
Wait,
somehow powder,
wait.
it then is not a problem.
Wait a minute here. It's physical impossibility to make dried egg without peeling the egg first.
Right, but it doesn't fall into the category of shelled. So therefore, if you're using dried egg is left overnight, it's not a problem.
Couldn't have got that when it took shell off.
But it's all being done before the prohibited time, right?
Well, while we're looking at this kind of like very fringe edge halakha, the concepts and the constructs, the conceptual framework, the what is permitted, what is prohibited, and the way the Talmud and later poskim look at it is what the more interesting piece of this is.
You know,
Okay?
there's an old Jewish proverb, and I will bring it in if anybody needs to see it in a book. It says, "Never live in a city run by scholars." Okay, so.
Only scholars.
Yes, so I think the same thing applies to this.
I understand, I get your foot dragging on this issue. It's
You-
fine,
You know,
But there's
you
more
know,
to learn than the bottom line halakha from this. So the bottom line halakha, whether you follow it or don't follow it, isn't perhaps the most interesting piece. It's the conceptual framework and construct.
So you're adding to my argument. We have
Okay.
we have a pick and choose religion. I can pick this and not pick that, and I can do this and not do that. It's my choosing.
Ultimately, yes, there is that. Nobody's gonna force it on you, so go ahead.
The egg, onion, or garlic clove is uncooked. When it is cooked, roasted, or fried, several poskim hold that it may be left overnight.
Okay, so to answer Mike's initial question, what about egg salad? Arguably,
It's okay.
it's okay, arguably.
Even if you have boiled and peeled eggs that you put in the fridge, especially for the prepared salad first thing in the morning, your intent wasn't to use it right away. So you'll find even this way. Okay?
There you go.
So you're in the process of peeling your garlic because you're gonna make a brisket.
Yeah.
And okay, everything's right there, and your next door neighbor comes in and says, hey, let's go down to the such and such, they're having a special for dinner tonight. And you say, okay, you put everything back in the refrigerator. You have your unpeeled you have your peeled garlic that you just got done peeling, but your intent was to use it so you can put it back in the refrigerator and it's okay.
The answer is perhaps. We haven't finished all of the pieces of this halakha to make that determination yet.
The egg, onion, or garlic is left the entire night. It is left for only part of, if it is left for only part of the night, it is permitted.
Okay, so if you get up at 3 a.m. to work on your brisket, you're okay. Okay, so we're looking at loopholes, right? We're looking at this is actually a good way to sort of experience legal thought, because it's not something we're wedded to one way or the other. I mean, you know, it's not something we have a passion about, and we must find a particular answer on this. Okay, so this last b'diavad is a very important concept and construct within halakha. So,
Yeah, but if these items were shelled or peeled and left overnight, what can be done? Some poskim hold.
so do people know what b'diavad means? Okay, lahatchil, in the beginning, I am planning to chop this and leave it overnight. Okay, my kavanah, I'm going to take an onion, I'm going to peel the whole thing, chop it, and leave it overnight, or I'm going to leave it out overnight. Okay, that's a problem. I'm not putting it in the freezer. That's a problem, at least according to this halakha. But somehow, in Mike's situation, my friend comes over and says, let's go, you know, you don't need this onion for this brisket, or you don't need this garlic for this brisket, whatever. Worry about that later. So initially, my intention is to cook the whole thing that night. Okay, lahat chil, my intention, in the beginning, my intention is to do a certain thing. Oops, but it didn't work out. So in the end, if it happens that stuff is peeled, and unfortunately I left it overnight, the diavad, after the fact, some poskim are going to say, it's okay, you don't have to be stringent. Okay? This is yet a very another important conceptual piece, a key to dealing with halakha. Lahat chil, maybe you're not allowed to do something on Shabbat, but b'diavad, you did it. Okay.
Can I make an observation?
Sure.
Your table is walking this way because the sun's just about back in his eyes.
Okay, so we can move over like a couple more feet this direction. Okay. Ready? Better? Slightly? Is it bad? Should we move? You say that with your eyes like half shut. Because we can certainly move this way a bunch.
We can close the.
I'm
No,
not sure,
it's
I
the
think it's
top
the
one.
upper one. It's the top.
one.
Oh.
This line is.
Yeah, right now it's on his collar, bottom part of his
So
collar.
let's try that way.
Okay, so here we go. Ready? This is the portable Talmudic table. Keep going.
I have sunglasses in the car.
No, we're gonna have to go further here. Let me pull this out.
You know, if we open the doors, we can go a little further.
Yeah, I'm good. So what I think this is about,
The general level of lightness.
what I think this is about is maybe the original reasoning for the
Red, would you move the board behind you?
for
I
the
don't know that we need it. Do we need it?
It makes a nice backdrop.
maybe the original reason for the prohibition was something to do with health reasons. Something to do with
Wasn't that always our argument when we
Eggs-
deal with kashrut?
eggs could go bad or something.
Maybe.
And
So how
so
do
maybe
you?
they came up with this rule and it seemed to help. However, it's kind of not required in the modern age.
Perhaps.
We have refrigerators to keep things in.
And keep in mind, in the 1500s, it wasn't something that Joseph Cairo brought forward, right?
Right.
So this was Talmudic times, and it was this was the rule. But we still haven't finished all the diavad. Who's up? Reading.
The diavad, if these items were shelved or filled and left overnight, what can be done? Some poskim hold that the diavad, one does not have to be stringent, and the filled foods should not be thrown away. And this is
And typically that's bal tashchi. Don't waste. Okay, that's one of our mitot.
And many other poskim, however, hold that even the diavad, these items should not be eaten.
Okay, so we've got split of opinion, and then
Some poskim hold that cooking or soaking the peeled vegetables in peeled items in vinegar removes the spirit of impurity from them, and they may then be eaten.
okay, so we can pickle things and
Other
keep them.
Other poskim do not mention these liens. Washing the peeled foods does not alter their status. They still may not be eaten.
So whatever it is, washing doesn't seem to affect. So
But
go.
may not be eaten is a gentle way of saying thrown away.
Well, unless you can find some, there's in terms of kashrut options. I'm not sure if this would fall into some category, but at some points, depending upon the kashrut status of, for example, the back end of a cow, you can sell it to other people. That's okay. It might not be something that we could eat, but other people could eat it. It would still be fine for them. So, and I don't know if this would fall into that category, but in other words, the individual couldn't eat it. Maybe you could use it for some kind of medicine, maybe another option. So even though not eaten, maybe it could have other purposes. So, but this is kind of like looking at a classic piece of Talmudic practice, how it's been brought forward by some, not all, and not something that even most people know about. But bringing in these key elements of intention, what's the underlying basis of it? If one's family has this custom, then you have to follow it. If you don't have that custom, maybe you don't have to follow it. There's loopholes and ways around it. So all of these, regardless of halakha, it's something that poskim look at. So,
And there is this story,
The loopholes.
I think on Shalom Aleichem, that says that one woman brought an egg to a rabbi, opened up and found some dot in it. And he basically asked her, he knew from what family she was coming from. He knew that they are very poor. And he said, it's okay.
right.
And, the next
And
time
that issue isn't the overnight egg, that's the blood spot. So blood spot on an egg is
Yeah.
another kashrut issue,
Yeah.
but the rabbi said, okay, because,
because the person could not afford to buy another egg if he felt it was always.
exactly, right. Yeah, there's actually a number of little stories that come from the Middle Ages, and often it's about a chicken. Bringing the chicken, is the chicken kosher? Can it be eaten? Can it be eaten? The rabbi looks and goes, kosher. Kosher. And the reason is compassion and selfishly. So you don't want to throw away things that you could theoretically use. All right, moving on to finishing up on this one little piece. We're on, I think, page 120. We're either on 121 or 122. All right, 121. We're at the Exelarch. Ask Rav Hamnuna. Mike, do you want to pick it up there?
Here,
Be marked right
it's from page 1.
there. All right, thank you. The Exelarch asked Rav, What is the meaning? If you cough, the Lord's holy day honored. He said this refers to the Day of Atonement when there is no eating or drinking. The Torah says honor it by wearing fresh clothes. If you honor it, Rob says, by starting it early, Shmuel says, by extending it late.
Okay, so we're gonna add a few minutes on Shabbat, early and late, make it 26 hours, what a great thing. That's a way to honor it.
Rav Papa Barabba, the sons asked him, what can people like us who have meat and wine every day do differently to honor the Shabbat? He said, if you normally eat early, eat later. If you normally eat late, eat earlier.
Okay, so this goes to doing something different, something special, making it unique.
In the summer, Rav Sheshet used to see his disciples on the Sabbath in the sun, in the winter in the shade, so that they would leave early and enjoy the Shabbat.
So he was using, negative reinforcement to get them out of there early? Yes, you're welcome to learn, but boy, is it hot today. Might want to go home early.
And do you think he called it negative reinforcement?
Perhaps not, perhaps not. So Rabbi Zera used to look for...
pairs of disciples engrossed in Torah study. Rashi, he would say to them, please do not profane this Shabbat.
And Rashi says at the bottom there,
he wanted to encourage them to enjoy the Shabbat he liked.
And then Rabbah,
Though some say Rabbi
Joshua ben Levi,
said, even if you pray alone on the Shabbat Eve, you should recite
Vaychulu.
Genesis 1:22, for Rav Huna said, when anyone prays on Shabbat Eve and recites
Vaychulu,
the Holy One, blessed be He, regards him as a partner in creation and says, Bakul, and they are completed. But reads instead, Bakulu, and they are complete.
Okay, so see the difference between the two? So, not, and they were completed, but an imperative, they completed. So the Holy One regards the person who's saying this part of Kiddush, they completed as a partner in creation. So this is one of the things that makes Shabbat special.
And it says on the footnote, this is active rather than passive, the plural to indicate participation by one who prays.
Yeah.
Rabbi Elazar said, how do you know the speech is like deed? It is written, by the word of the Lord, the heavens were made. Rav Hizda said in the name of Amar, when anyone prays on Shabbat Eve and recites the two ministering angels who accompany each person lay their hands on his head and say, your guilt shall depart and your sins will be purged.
Okay, so from Isaiah. So now we have a very famous story that we've heard over and over and over again. It comes from Talmud, and it has to do with what happens on the way home from shul.
This time, Rabbi Yossi ben Yehuda says, two ministering angels, one good and one bad, accompany each person home when he returns from the synagogue on the Sabbath eve. And he arrives home to find a lamp shining, the table laid, and the divinely spread. The good angel says, may it be God's will that it should be so on the Sabbath to come. And the bad angel is forced to say, Amen. But if not, the bad angel says, may it be God's will that it should be so on the Sabbath to come. And the good angel is forced to say, Amen.
Okay, so two angels accompanying somebody home at night, and if it's all prepared, the good angel gets to say, awesome, let's do it again next week. Bad angel has to say, all right, may it be so. So,
So the
this is
forces
why
of-
we always try to have our table laid, our best whatever we have for Hidur Mitzvah.
So we have the two forces, the forces of good and the forces for not so good,
Yes, something like that.
not quite so good.
Rabbi Eliezer said, a person should always set his table on the Sabbath eve, even if he needs no more than an olive size to eat.
So even if somebody's eating just a little bit, having the beautiful atmosphere is an important piece of celebrating Shabbat.
So he only needs an olive size for dinner.
Probably someone who might not have a lot of food or spent their money on candles.
Is there a measurement also what constitutes a kippah? If the hole on top is bigger than 4, it's not considered a
Really? So you can have an olive-sized kippah? Usually the olive size has to do with when do you say a bracha on something.
And that's, yeah, it's kind of,
Are you eating an olive size? Is it kitzait or lo?
it's like a standard measure.
Yeah, a measure, exactly. Right. So we'll ponder that point about having an olive size kippah.
Well, I heard about it when I started moving to Port. Somebody somehow got to me about it. I can make it 2 ways because the top part.
Oh, the holes can't be that big. Oh, but the kippah has, okay.
No, the top should not have a hole.
Bigger than an olive.
It should be kind of covered basically, and then you can do it in one of these ways.
Yeah, thank you.
That's sort of weird, isn't it?
Well, there's that.
And Rabbi Feenan said,
Kanina?
Fanina said, a person should always set his table after the Sabbath, even if he needs no more than an olive size to eat, as opposed to before the Sabbath.
Apparently.
Hot water after Shabbat is therapeutic. Hot bread after Shabbat is therapeutic.
Okay, so hot water, interestingly enough, here it says for drinks or washing, according to Rashi, because our tradition has come to say, okay, no great bathing on Shabbat, right? Because it's a state of being, not a state of doing or changing. So, but here it says hot water after Sabbath is therapeutic. But Rashi's still saying it has to do with drinks or washing. Okay.
Really no bathing on Shabbat.
Well, there is that halakha, like many of these interesting halakha.
This is pretty standard, I think, because somewhere from my far away past, and also when we lived in Morocco, they definitely did not use the same best Sunday dress or whatever all the way to Friday night, through all day services in the synagogue to end of Shabbat, and only then you can take Shabbat.
Right.
So,
Mikvah prior to Shabbat, right? The Hasidic crew do, so.
They used to prepare a three-year-old calf for Rabbi Abahu after Sabbath, but he just ate the kidneys. When the son of Abihu grew up, he asked, "Why did you waste all that food? Keep some kidney from Sunday Eve. They left some, but a lion came and ate the calf."
Okay, lovely little stories. And according to Rashi, the calf would have been eaten after Sabbath. Okay, all right, interesting. So now we're going to move into this issue about Mazzal. So astrology, etc., is very prevalent within Talmud. This was an interesting class that I took once upon a time, Kabbalistic astrology. The rabbi who taught it was Rabbi Joel Dovin, and he is probably, I would say, venture to guess, maybe in his 90s at this point. So there's an interesting piece that I'll just pass around here. It's got this little purple sticker on it. Biblical references to the constellation. And so this is constellation, tribe, and archangel, and planet. And also pieces where it comes from within Torah. It happens to be one of the tables. So, Diane, do you want to pick that up?
Reference to a point of law written in Zerah's notebook leads to citations from the notebooks of other rabbis, including one from the notebook of the 3rd century Palestinian Aggadist Joshua ben Levi, that seems to imply that a person's character or fortune is determined by the day of the week on which he was born. But Rabbi Hanina declares that a person's life is guided by the Mazzal in the ascendant at the time he was born. Mazzal has been left untranslated since its meaning varies. It can mean constellation, sign of the zodiac, or as here, heavenly body that moves, i.e., sun, moon, or planet. Greek and Indian astrology arrived in Iran, including Babylonia, shortly after Ardashir I founded the Sasanian Empire in 226, when Rav and Shmuel were active. The astrologers believed that people's lives were controlled by influences from the heavenly bodies, though widespread in the ancient world, conflicts with basic Jewish teachings on free will, reward, and punishment. Yohanan, Rav, Shmuel, and several of their successors distance themselves from Hanina's gen theology and demonstrate that Israel stands directly under divine providence, immune from astrological influence, so long as she is faithful to God's commandments.
Okay, so Hanina's genealogy, yeah, it has to do with natal astrology. So whatever month you were born in, all of that kind of thing, which is still a common, you know, you can read it in newspaper, horoscopes today.
Belief in astrology persisted among Jews into modern times, and with only rare voices such as that of Maimonides daring to challenge it. The Jewish congratulatory expression Mazel Tov, good constellation, derives from this belief. But if this man was teaching and he's in his 90s, then he actually is purporting to support astrology and Judaism.
I think that I don't know that I would call him an advocate necessarily. I would say that he's brought forward teachings that are Talmudic and later and sort of, you know, brought that information forward. That's all. There's certainly argument, which is, I mean, you're asking a bottom line question. So do we believe in astrology or not? And the answer is typically no. And typically there's this whole discussion about how Abraham was brought above the stars and therefore, you know, Mazel doesn't matter. However, we're back 2,000 years ago here in the Gemara talking about astrology. So this comes from Tractate Shabbat, and we're going to read about what Rabbi Hanina had to say about it.
You can't argue that. You can sit and discuss it, but you can't argue the point that astrology does not affect Judaism. And it may not be the same astrology that you look at today when you open up the page and it says, you know, if you were born such and such a time, and you remember today, if you don't wave your left hand, piece of pie is going to be on the table. The whole calendar.
I have it at home. I haven't read it yet.
The whole structure of the calendar is based on a combination of astrology and study the sun.
Well, and
Otherwise, the holidays would not show up on the same days.
All of those things are true. So that's astronomy a little bit, perhaps less astrology.
Well,
So
you also have
astrological
signs and discovered in some of the ancient synagogues.
all true. All true. Or of Chaldees, that's right.
Chaldeans were very good astronomers, the best at that time, whatever. But well, this is historical, not right. But he brought his understanding that he's not dependent on his planets.
Or at least the Midrash is brought.
This is okay. But Midrash
Yeah.
understands that. Even so, he came from civilization with much higher knowledge on every field, including astronomy. But he brought the knowledge with him while Midrashim turned into this modern areas.
And of course. Okay, so, Steve, the Gemara, chapter 24 of Tractate Shabbat.
Rabbi Hanina says, go tell the son of Levi that it is not the Mazzal of the day of birth that determines, but the Mazzal of the hour. One who is born under the sun will be radiant. He will eat of his own and drink of his own, but his secrets will be disclosed, and he will not succeed if he attempts to steal. One who is born under Venus will be rich, a provider of sustenance, for light is born within him. One born under Mercury will be radiant and wise, For Mercury is the sun's scribe. He who is born under the moon will suffer hardship. He will build and it will be destroyed, and will destroy, and it will be built. He will eat that which is not his, and drink that which is not his. His secrets will stay concealed. If he steals, he will succeed. He who is born under Saturn will be one of those plans, one whose plans are frustrated. Some say plans made against him will be frustrated. He who is born under Jupiter will be just. Rav Nachman Bar Izak says, just in the performance of the commandments. He who is born under Mars will be a shedder of blood. Rav Ashi says he could be a bloodletter, a butcher, a robber, or a moil.
So many good choices there, right? You know, just because somebody is born under Mars and is a shedder of blood, you see Rav Ashi is taking it and giving it a good twist or a good turn, which is one of the concepts and constructs we talked about dreams. If somebody's a dream interpreter, one gives it a good turn. So here, even though maybe a shedder of blood, okay, let's give it a good turn, give it a positive spin. They could be a bloodletter, which in those days was somebody who was a healer. A butcher, somebody that they needed, you know, in their communities to be able to check to whatever the animals were. A robber, okay, problematic, or a moil. All right, so. Or a nurse, all of those things. Although I'm pretty sure my sign isn't Mars.
Rabbi said, I was born under Mars, but I am none of those things. Abai responded, Master, you to punish and slay.
So here we have, let's look at the footnote on that. Abai is saying, wait, this doesn't describe me, however.
Abai refers to Rabbi's activities as a judge.
Okay, so he's maybe slaying people, he's punishing people and slaying people. And so this being born under Mars has this expanded notion and concept. It says it's unlikely that Babylonian Jewish courts exercised capital judgment, but they flogged offenders, which that's another good punishment, perhaps draw blood.
Oh, so Jewish courts did not exercise capital?
Typically not. They were not allowed to. The exilarch was the one who was involved in the dispensing or the liaison between the Babylonian authorities and the Jewish community. But there wasn't, they were still under the rule of the Babylonians and would not have been allowed to enforce the capital punishment themselves. Somebody pick it up there, Judy?
It was taught. Rabbi Hanina said, Mazzal makes wise, Mazzal makes rich. Israel is subject to Mazzal. Rabbi Yohanan said, Israel is not subject to Mazzal.
Okay, so right, we've got the classic, I say yes, he says no, right?
And now it's explanation. This view of Rabbi Yohanan is consistent with suspicions for Rabbi Yohanan said, how do we know that Israel is not subject to Mazzal? It is written, thus is the Lord learn from the ways of the nations, and the Lord fear the signs in the sky as the nations fear them.
And so we have a proof verse, right?
There is, let the nations fear signs in the sky, but let not Israel fear. It's God's truth that Israel is not subject to Mazzal, but as we would have said in Rab's name, how do we know that Israel is not subject to Mazzal? It is written, and he took him outside. Abraham said before the Holy One that he will Lord the universe. One of my household will be my heir. He said, no, one who issues from your loins will be your heir. Abraham said to him,
so this is the issue about Abraham didn't have a child at this point, right? So Abraham is thinking, somebody from my household, maybe his trusted servant was going to be his heir. But wait a second, God says, no, it's going to be really your son or daughter, whatever. One who issues from your loins will be your heir. So Abraham said,
The Lord beyond I have looked at my horoscope, and I'm not destined to produce a son. The Lord replied to Abraham, abandon your horoscope. Israel is not subject to Mazzal. What is the reason you say you cannot produce a son? Is it because Jupiter is in the west? Then I shall return it to the east, as it's written. Who has raised Jupiter from the east, summoned it to do his bidding.
okay, so what's God saying to Abraham here? Don't put your stock in Mazzal. I'm going to fix it up, God says, right? If it's because Jupiter's in one part of, the east, I'll put it in the west. If it's in the west, I'll put it in the east. God is going to take care of this situation.
Basically, Abraham is not subject to whatever Chaldeans were subject to.
Right,
He
right.
is subject only to one God.
Yes.
And you can enter the small
Judy, just get the 61 there.
61. Okay. These were the common translations since 7 is victory or righteousness. However, it is also the Hebrew name for Jupiter.
And who knew? So Jupiter has the name of Saturn.
Yeah, I was just reading that. And if you infer that Shmuel 2 held that Israel is not subject to Mazzal, for Shmuel and Adlot or Ablot.
And Ablat is a Gentile sage or astrologer in Babylonia, not known outside the Talmud.
Were sitting together, and some men passed on their way to the field. And Ablat said to Shmuel, that man's going, but he will not return. A snake will bite him, and he will die. And Shmuel said, if he is an Israelite, he will return. While they were still sitting there, he returned, and Ablat got up, set the man's load down, and found the snake inside with it been cut in half. And Shmuel asked the man, what did you do? He replied, every day we all put food in the basket, and together we eat it. Today I saw that one of us had no food, and he was embarrassed. So I said to my companions, I will collect the food and put it in the bag. And when I reach the man who had none, I will pretend to take food from him so that he shouldn't be embarrassed. And Shmuel said, you did a mitzvah. Shmuel then went out and preached and charity saves from death. Proverbs 10:3. And not just from not painful death, but from any death.
Okay, so do you see what happened? They were all reaching into the basket. This guy didn't want his buddy to be shamed that he hadn't put anything in, so he reached in pretending to take some food, saying, oh, thank you so much, right? He was doing a mitzvah. And that's why,
I didn't follow back to sleep after that.
assuming perhaps that the snake was elsewhere, somebody cut the snake in half.
But he got saved by doing
He got saved by doing this. He got saved by
But not
doing this.
necessarily because he was Israelite. Because the story starts with the Gentiles.
Right.
Right.
But yet he was subject to the mitzvah, so
Okay.
therefore of not shaming his neighbor.
So it's not enough to be Israelite.
No, you actually have to do something. There's that. Yeah, you have to do good things. It's those good karma points, otherwise known in Hebrew as midah keneged midah. Okay, so next, and we're down at the bottom of the page 125, and you can infer that Rabbi Akiva too held that Israel is not subject to Mazzal. Rabbi Akiva had a daughter, and this is a great story, and the Chaldean astrologers told him that on the day she walked in the garden, a snake would bite her and she would die. There's actually another story, I think in Genesis Rabbah, that on her wedding day she would die. But anyway, he worried a lot about it. One day he took off the ornamental plate she was wearing on her forehead and stuck it in the soil. It pierced the eye of the snake. When she picked it up in the morning, the dead snake dragged behind her. Her father asked her what she had done. She said, last evening, a poor man called at the door, but everybody was busy at the feast and no one heard him. So I took a portion of the food you had given me and gave it to him. Rabbi Akiva then went out and preached Charity saves from death, not just painful death, but from any death. There's another story in one of the Midrashim about how she was on her wedding day and she had a pin. And so whatever it was that she had done, something kind, something good, she ended up taking her pin off and sticking the pin in through the wall. And this was another situation where she killed the snake in this way. The pin that she took off killed the snake. So, and you can infer from Rabbi Nachman bar Isaac's story, too, that Israel is not subject to Mazzal. The Chaldean astrologer told Rabbi Nachman bar Isaac's mother that her son was destined to be a robber. Okay, so this is something you got to understand in terms of like the nth degree about how a tzaddik views this issue of robbery. Okay, so the mother would not let him uncover his head, but said, "Cover your head, so that the fear of Hashemayim, fear of heaven, should be upon you, and pray." He did not know why she said that. One day he was sitting under a palm tree studying when his garment slipped from his head. He looked up at the palm. Temptation overcame him, and he climbed up and tore off a bunch of dates with his teeth. But Rashi said the palm tree did not belong to him. Okay, so he was a robber. He was underneath the palm tree. His head covering came off, somehow losing that fear of heaven, and he just, one thing led to another. He found himself up there and he grabbed some of the dates.
Some people need
The constant reminder, or the tzitzit. There's a number of the, those little stories about the tzitzit, flying up and slapping the guy, when he was about to have a problem. So, all right, so let's. Because women have that kind of intrinsic boundary, at least according to some.
Okay.
So let's get started on Eruvin. What do we know about Eruvs? Anybody?
These pretty wires and modern times.
Okay, so that's a particular kind of Eruv. So tell us more about that kind of Eruv.
Well, an fascinating will have a wire that defines the boundaries of the group or the people in the town.
And how are the wires put? Or where are they put?
Well, they're often put on telephone poles, just under infrastructure that's already there.
And they look like regular wires, right? Okay, so there's little pegs that are put on top of telephone poles to create an Eruv. And in some Orthodox communities, there will be internet access, so you can make sure that the Eruv is up. Why is that important?
So you don't go on Shabbat.
What a good thing. Yes, and
Or you can't go.
so you can carry, because carrying from one domain inside, outside, that kind of thing, to the street, from inside to outside, would be forbidden because you can't carry, right? You can't carry things.
So you couldn't carry this to do it to,
Right? Even though you'd be using it, so it wouldn't be muksa, which is another issue we talked about, but to be able to carry on Shabbos.
In some place like police or Brooklyn or New York, how big is Eruvin?
So, some are, my guess is they can only be like 2,000 tefachim or something, or 2,000, whatever it is, about something. Because there's actually halakhic guidance on how far one can literally walk on Shabbos.
But in small towns it was easy because
That's right, then you didn't have to worry about it. Yeah, it can't be tefachim because that's like this far, that's more than that. So 2,000 cubits, so you're looking at 2,000 of this measurement, right? From elbow to center of foot. All right. Anybody else know about any other kind of Eruv?
But when it's huge, when it's plant, they're supposed to be some limits of how close.
Species, yeah.
Slightly different, so not necessarily an Eruv,
Oh,
but you're right, that there would be necessarily separation between different kinds of species, so they weren't right, no grafting, that kind of thing, right? True, not necessarily an Eruv, right? Okay, so let's read that. I'm going to pick up the italics there.
After bringing the Israelites out of Egypt, God fed them in the desert with bread from the sky, which they called manna. 6 days it rained down for them, but not on the seventh. Instead, they collected a double portion on Fridays. Moses' instructions for the seventh day were that everyone remain where he is, let no one leave his place on the seventh day.
Okay, so let no one leave his place. This is our fundamental Torah basis for an Eruv. We need to know where our place is, right? Or how far we're allowed to go.
Some rabbis understood this to mean that people should remain within allotted boundaries on the Sabbath. But these boundaries would
If you want to pick up the kind of a slightly interesting side note there,
Okay. So,
the footnote.
you have
Okay, I can do it if you want. Okay, so these pieces, these allotted boundaries, come from Eruvin 48a and 51a. Those are the dafim. All right. So we also have this letter that is ridiculing the rabbis following the, quote, carnal sense of the scripture. And this comes from a piece of the New Testament, Colossians. Since it's commanded that on Sabbath, each one should sit in his home and not leave his place in which he lives. They say, our teachers, Barachabas and Shimon and Hillel, gave us their tradition that we may go 2,000 paces on the Sabbath. Okay, so the teachers, they're sort of thinking that these guys listed in the New Testament were really Akiva, Shimon, and Hillel. So, but yet, do we need to have an Eruv? Don't we need to have an Eruv? At least according to this piece of Colossians, they were ridiculing this notion that there should be a limited boundary.
These boundaries would depend on where you were when it commenced. If, for instance, you were in a village, you would be permitted to walk anywhere in it, and 2,000 cubits beyond, in any direction. A town or village you encountered within the 2,000 cubits would count as only 4 cubits, so you could move anywhere within it too. If you wanted to visit the next village, say this is at 3,000 cubits, you could do this by establishing residence at a spot which was within 2,000 cubits of both villages, either by being there at the commencement of the Sabbath or by placing a meal there in advance. This meal is known as a move to remove the boundaries.
Okay, so this is yet another way to get around loopholes, right? These are the loopholes on how to get around this issue. So you've got two towns, they're 3,000 cubits from each other. From a technical halachic basis, you couldn't travel from one to the other, right? How do we get around it?
Set up a camp in the middle.
You set up a camp in the middle with a little lechem, right? Good, good.
See, there's a whole new business for it.
Loopholes?
No, setting up little towns.
2,000 paces is not really very far. That's like a kilometer. And people who are good Sabbath walkers can do much more. In fact, when I walked to synagogue, when I lived in Minnesota, I walked to synagogue, it was burning.
So then one has to be concerned about, is there some middle spot where you're considering it your Eruv Techumin, or, just remember you can't carry, which is a whole other piece if there's no Eruv around it on the edge also. So different kind of Eruvin. All right, another boundary?
Another sort of boundary derives from private property. If you and I live in houses that open to a common courtyard, or nowadays in separate apartments in a block, there is a boundary to my property, a boundary to yours, in a common area through which we both have rights of passage. Well, there is no restriction on our movements within any of these areas, since they fall within the 2,000 cubic limit. There's a rabbinic restriction on transferring objects from one area to another. The device by which the restriction is lifted is called Eruv Hatzirot, the era of the courtyards. All residents of the courtyard contribute to a common meal placed in the house of one of them, so that they regard themselves as residing together for the Sabbath meal.
So you want to be able to eat together, right? You live in an apartment building or two apartment buildings that are close together. You have a common walkway, entryway, and there's this courtyard. But you want to go to so-and-so's house for, Malva Malka. You want to go to so-and-so's house for, Shabbat noontime meal. How do you do that? How do you like take the bread that you had cooked and you've left at your house over to so-and-so's house across the courtyard? This is the way that it's done.
And the issue is the carrying of the food.
Yes. Or anything else. I mean, pots and pans or whatever else you're shopping.
The word mixture or sharing denotes that as Shmuel remarks, if someone insists on having his own piece of bread, the Eruv would be invalid for all, since Eruv denotes sharing. Clearly, the Eruv carries social as well as religious significance. Our courtyard may be one of many that open to the street. In that case, as well as erecting a token boundary at the end of the streets, all the residents of the courtyards will share in a third kind of Eruv, known as a Shatuf Muvurot. This kind of Eruv is commonly set up around a town or an area within a town, enabling observers to carry within the designated area. A fourth type of Eruv.
So this is the one that you're talking about. Sorry, go ahead.
A fourth type of Eruv Tav Shlilim, allows the preparation of food for the Sabbath and festival days.
So this is like by time, an Eruv of time. So you can't cook on Shabbos, but you've got a festival day. You want to be able to cook on the festival day. You have to create this kind of an Eruv in order to halakhically be able to do that.
And this is mother?
Yes, absolutely.
So, like, anybody, like, rabbi, you buy money or stays in some place like Atlantis, which is more than 200 cubits.
2,000 cubits.
It's actually not. That's actually.
That would be the assumption that it's not.
I can check that. Let me do the math.
It's all right, I already Googled it.
That's the point where it shouldn't be checked.
It shouldn't be checked. Steve actually has a very important piece, which is why I said it's within the 2,000. So my conclusion is exactly what Steve was, the backup plan. Don't check.
Oh, yeah, because
Right?
2,000 is kind of beyond counting. It's like 50,000, 2,000. So it's like, yeah, it must be within.
And it must be within because we don't really want to know. I mean, that's the flip side of this entire conversation, right? So these are the kind of legal leaps that we make in terms of these issues. So, I think that probably many of us just don't dig deep enough into the legal constructs. I find them fascinating. I find them interesting. I mean, I love talking about, something that, may or may not be on my list of things to worry about. But the reason that it's important is because we have a Talmudic custom that was not brought forward. We've got all of these pieces that are brought forward to learn about, halacha and how we get there, and why some is important, why some has more importance than others. It's learning about taking priority, what we should pay attention to, how do we get around it with a legal, viable loophole, or do we not want to check, right? Because on some level, maybe we don't want to know. So if one wants to poskin about an issue, all of these things come to play. Anyway.
And some people that don't go through all these very...
That never have these conversations within their brain, right?
Yeah.
Never have the a luxury of creating compartments and learning what compartments meet, what hierarchies are important, all of that, all of those things.
I can see it now. The officer says, how fast were you going after you pulled you over? Oh, I was going 85. Well, the speed limit is, officer, I don't want to know.
Don't check it.
Okay, so obviously you can't do that with everything. I mean, certainly there are things that's going to be more important. Okay, we already have a practice established. I mean, there's, even if looking at this particular halachic issue, we have a practice established that observant people stay at the Atlantis and come and walk on Shabbos, right? So if there's an established practice, you don't want to just throw that out the door by having this complete, jot and tittle.
Well, also, the concept of Eruv is one of those interesting pieces of halacha that's kind of been worked by conservative Judaism as far as I can tell, and it's kind of not been worked enough by Judaism. So It's a
But
very.
in order to do this, the only reason we are not, we don't know what's going on with them is because we're just too far removed from that. And because of that, I like the story that Ayer of Ayer in the English scholars. They grew up in Orthodox environment, Boston, in New York. Like Yair didn't want to get paid for Hebrew lessons that he was giving to John Faragi once, okay? He said to me that his father never charged anything for lessons of Talmud, Tanakh, or Hebrew, because that's the custom. Like,
So you have to work in another
Yes.
field in
Yes.
order to be able to pay for it.
Exactly.
Although there are also strains of thought within, you know, Hasidic and Orthodox environment that the Rebbe gets paid in various and different ways.
Exactly.
Give a blessing,
But-
get paid.
but what
Okay,
I-
so I mean,
Yeah.
there's like a whole lot of pieces.
Yeah.
This is just one little
Yeah.
thread. But go ahead.
But the thing that I actually wanted to say is Ayo told us about when she was 10 years old. She spent a summer in a Chabad camp. And when she came back home, she just, oh my God, Mom, you don't know anything about kashrut. And her mother smiled, very Orthodox, okay? She said, like, you'll grow up and figure it out, okay? So she told us that story about how within the Orthodox there are so many different levels of kashrut. So you have, when you grow up, you figure it out. So you have to know a little more than 10-year-old or 7-year-old in order to be tolerating some things, even within Orthodox, much less between Reform and Conservative.
And I really do believe that the more that we learn, at some level, certainly the more tolerant we are. Because one of the fundamental bases is really our compassion towards others, which is a midah that is, you know, primary within Judaism. Anyway, I think that if you guys come to this class, you might find interesting pieces. She brings forward not only the Kromana Rebbe's sort of experience and his writings and the Baal Shem Tov's writings, but talks about like how Bilam and Moses were somehow equated, how they were somehow fragments of each other, how those people that we consider that are completely overboard, not part of us, are really a close and personal part of us.
Balaam,
Bilam,
you know, had the talking donkey.
Bilam, and how, you know, Amalek is that group that we, you know, despise and say completely evil. They were the ones who were at our feet, you know, taking off the poor and the sick and the weak, and how that group maybe the, you know, it's not up for us to make a decision about who's Amalek. We don't know. It's up to God to make those decisions, right? And our job is done, kasakut, to judge the merit. So on that note, thank you very much.
So very simply, the